Welcome to Dig Deep, the mining podcast. In this podcast, we go deep into mining news, hot topics, and live interviews with mining professionals and leading figures in the mining industry. Introducing your host, Rob Tyson, founder and director of Mining International and Mining International Executive, a leading global mining recruitment and headhunting agency.
Hi, mining community. Welcome back to another episode of the Dig Deep, the mining podcast. And today's guest is Alan Matthews. He's an experienced mining executive with over 40 years experience working executive roles within the industry. So obviously has a wealth of experience in the industry. He graduated from the Camborne School of Mines in 1974 and spent the next half century globe-trotting around the world, from mine sites as far-flung as Peru to Papua New Guinea and many other places. With this, Alan decided to write a book of his career named Overseas and Underground: Ventures of a Modern Cornish Miner. And we're going to have a chat about the book and dig deeper into Alan's career and see what we can learn. See what we can learn from his experiences, and hopefully you, the audience, can take some bits away from Alan's experience and possibly help you in your own career. So that's welcome, Alan, to the podcast. How you doing, Alan?
Great. Thanks very much, Rob. Really appreciate the opportunity to be able to address your audience.
Yeah, and I appreciate your time. And obviously, as I mentioned, you've just recently wrote a book, which we're going to shortly. But wondered if you can, and obviously I just summarised, made a summary there of your career. But I wondered if you can give our audience a little bit of background about your obviously 40-year career. I wonder if you can just give us a snapshot of obviously from when you graduated to sort of present day.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So when I graduated, I went out to South Africa with my wife. That was in 1974. Worked on the gold mine there, Freddie's Consolidated, which was not in Welkom. It was just outside of Welkom, where most of the School of Mines and Royal School of Mines graduates were. We did 3 years there. Got my mine manager's certificate, and I didn't feel like progressing through the Anglo system, so got another job, came back to Cornwall, and deviated then slightly going into the oil business, because at the time, 77, 78, mining was in a bit of a slump, and I went back to the School of Mines, and Tony Batchelor, who sadly passed away here last year, recommended I should go and work for one of the oil service companies. So that done, I jumped on the plane and went to Pau in France, trained as a service engineer there. From there, we were shipped out to Abu Dhabi and spent 12, 14 months there. That was pretty tough. It was on the rig most of the time. I was fortunate at one time to be on the Ile de France and Ile d'Amsterdam, which are two French rigs, and they were the only two wet rigs in the Gulf. So we always had a glass of wine at dinner time, because I doubt the French would have carried on working if they didn't have that. Yeah. So from there we went to Greece, to a small underground barite mine, which was a challenge. People would break into the explosive store and use the dynamite for fishing off the coast. And that sort of thing went on quite often. So there was about 2 years there, and then I was transferred to Scotland to assist in the bringing into production the Foss mine just above Aberfeldy. We were there for, I think it was three years, yeah, or more. That was good. Again, in a career, often it happens that you get to the stage where you're about ready to go into production, and either the market falls out, the bottom of the market falls out for barite in this instance, or gold, or whatever it is, So we were put on to care and maintenance, and yeah, didn't sort of suit me very well. So then we went, where did we go then? Oh, yeah, Papua New Guinea. I initially went out there, I thought I was going to be assisting small miners in developing their projects, but it turned out I was to be the inspector of mines for the giant Teddy copper gold mine, based on site. So we were thousands of kilometers, well, sorry, not thousands, at least 1,000 kilometers away from civilization. There was nothing up there. There was a town, and that was it. And at the time, the company were in dispute with the government, and I was the only government representative on site. So that was a difficult situation. But we got through it. One stage I actually had to close the entire mine, and everybody was laid off for 6 weeks. So we weren't very popular at the time. So from Papua New Guinea, where do we go? Oh yeah, we went to British Columbia. Started working for a couple of entrepreneurs on the Dolly Varden project, which is an old mine. We were in the process of trying to explore and find new ore bodies associated with it. That was a good move. I enjoyed that. And then one of the guys that I met in Papua New Guinea that was running the Octedi, Roy Shipes, was in the process of starting his company, which was dealing with SXEW copper projects that he had in Tucson, Arizona. So he asked me to come down and be a project manager for those. So we got Johnson Cap going, which was one of the first SXEWs to be put in production, I think, by a junior. I think that's the way to put it. So we were the darling of the stock, VSE or TSX at the time. Then again, that got taken over by another group, Breakwater. In fact, we took over Breakwater. So I was shipped down to Honduras on occasions to go down there. And then I met another entrepreneur in Phoenix, and he said, "Well, kid, you better come and work for me. I can see you're not happy down there." So okay. So he had a couple of small VSE companies which I sort of ran for him, and I thought, actually, you know what, I can do this. So I got a bunch of friends together, got some seed capital together, and listed Kerno Resources and Developments Limited on the Vancouver Stock Exchange as it was then. Raised a few bucks, drilled a few holes, had a lot of fun, and then moved over to Portugal to manage one of the projects that we'd acquire over there, which was the Gels gold mine, and it had been closed about 6 or 7 years prior to my getting the license there. And so then I was trying to develop that, develop the ore reserves through drilling, doing a little bit of additing, doing a little bit of off-property exploration as well. And then at the same time, I was a director for International Minerals Limited. And they asked me to come back actually to Phoenix and work in their offices there. And I worked there for a while, going down to Ecuador, which was an adventure in itself. Eventually we realized that being in Ecuador was not a sensible thing to be doing at that time. The government had taken by proxy one of our exploration properties, which was quite valuable. And we saw no future in progressing with developing the projects we had there. So I had the grand task again of closing the operations down there, which we did. And then that company was taken over again. And by this time, I was doing a little bit of consulting here and there as well. So after that, I'm just checking my list here, Rob, to make sure where I'm at. Oh, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
certainly,
So
you've certainly been well travelled. So I
yeah,
imagine you
yeah.
might have
So
missed a few countries off.
yeah, but then we we moved back to Cornwall. So I was doing some consulting at the same time. I was going to Armenia, Tajikistan, Spain, Bolivia. Yeah. So there basically there it is. It's been a lot of fun. A lot of
Yeah,
fun.
I can imagine. So there's one question I wanted to ask. I get a lot of graduate. I speak to quite a few graduates who are looking to basically they're either graduating or about to graduate, and they're looking at their options. And sometimes, especially if they're, I suppose, from the Camborne School of Mines here in the UK, there seems to be limited options for them, and they ask me for my advice. Um, and I do, and my advice is really go and explore the world. Um, some may be up for that, some may not be. Um, Obviously, you're someone that's been well travelled. What would you, if some, obviously the candidates that are up for going and exploring, that's fine. They're just asking for a little bit more advice. But what advice would you give to graduates that are on the fence, or maybe a little bit, how can I put it? They don't. I suppose they don't know the unknown, and they may be not even sitting on the fence, not even really focusing on going around the world,
Yeah.
or even going to one place around the world. It doesn't have to mean traveling around the world, but even going to another country. What advice can you give them to maybe give a little bit of encouragement and to maybe think about looking at traveling abroad and going and work on a mine site, and what it's obviously done for you making that first step?
Yeah. I guess the first thing is I it is a big move, and I think probably the first thing you do is to do some research on the country you're going to, and if you have got an offer, or if you even went at the interview stage, make absolutely sure that the company that you're going to work for is reputable, and that quite well, not often, but a few times have been in the position where you've said, been to an interview, and the guys have said, "Oh, you're just a chap we need," and so on and so forth. And then doing a little due diligence, you find out that it's been a front for something, and quite often I've seen it happen to a couple of other people. So they've gone out, they've become the fall guy because they were in the front there. So do the research on the company, do the research on the country as well. And also, if you have a partner, make absolutely sure that both of you want to go, because there's nothing worse than being in Peru or some place where you're not happy, especially in a mining camp, because that can, it's so small and everybody knows what's going on and that. So yeah, so do your research on the country as well. And if you are going to go, I would advise trying to get under your belt another language, Spanish, for example, or something other than English, so that at some stage you may be able to, it might become useful. But I would say also, having said that, I would encourage young people to take up a career in mining overseas, because you're going to experience all sorts of new and exciting landscapes and people, characters. So I key, I think, is research.
Yeah, and I suppose obviously this podcast is global, so this may not necessarily be appropriate for certain. For instance, if you're from Canada, from Australia, South Africa, where you have got a big industry on your doorstep, but somewhere for like the UK that doesn't. If you don't consider an opportunity abroad, then you're then your opportunities are going to be limited. So again, from your experience, if you didn't make that first move abroad, how would you have seen your career develop?
Well, that's a tough one, isn't it? Well, let's go back to 1974 when Wheel Jane was just about going. I think I'd done a few summers at Pendarvis, the tin mine just outside of Camborne. I think there were opportunities in the extractive industry that could have been seized, or if you will. English China Clays, I'd worked for them before I went to the School of Mines. They were operating. I guess the other thing is the coal mining industry. It's quite, well, it was then quite prolific. So that's where, I mean, I would have probably plumped to stay in Cornwall and gone to one of the tin mines, Givor, Wheel Jane, and or English China Clays. And then also, I think there was some stuff going on in Bulby, in Northumberland. So that was where I've been looked. But I understand now that a lot of the School of Mines graduates are in tunneling, HS2, and for the Channel tunnel at one time as well. So that would have been an opportunity. I think if you really want to stay in mining and you want to stay in the UK, then you can do stuff. I mean, you could become a broker or an analyst, make lots and lots of money.
But do you think it's good to get that site exposure before you move into those types of roles?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because you've got to know a little bit of what you're talking about. You can learn an awful lot from books, and you can tell, if you're going in to raise money, sometimes you can tell the chaps that haven't actually done anything other than sat behind a desk. You meet them, you think, oh, okay, that's fine. But it doesn't take very long to figure out this chap really hasn't gotten a huge amount of experience. Yeah. So yes. Yeah. Absolutely. You do need at least 3 or 4 years, I think.
Yeah. So let's go on and obviously talk about the book. I wonder if you can just give us an overview of the book, but also what made you decide to write the book?
Yeah. What made me decide to write the book was I had over the years made notes about various places I'd been. One particular example or session was, you may not remember Alistair Cook, who used to write a letter from America. And we used to listen to it on the World Service and so on. And when we moved from the States to Portugal, I get an awful lot of questions about, what are you doing? How's life there? And so on. So I just sort of wrote a diary about what we were doing, the fun and games I had with the government, how the project was progressing, and I sent it out. I think there was about 14 episodes, and I used to email them to people and they get feedback and so on. So that sort of formed the basis of it. And then I started looking back through my notes, and I thought, oh, okay, this is okay. These just need a little bit of touching up, and we can make a book out of this. So when we moved here, fortunately, next door is a published author who has her own publishing company. So I mentioned this. She said, well, let me have a look at some of them and I'll see what we can do. So he looked at them and said, yeah, this will make a good book. So then she edited, suggested different chapters and so on. Did a lot of fact checking, come back to me and said, this isn't right. And oh, which is a bit of a surprise when you sort of think, oh, yeah, to have somebody else fact check on you. And yeah. So that's how it sort of evolved. And it's been an awful lot of fun. It really has. Yeah.
Yeah. So I suppose anyone I suppose it can be any career. It doesn't have to be the mining career, but anyone in a career should, I suppose, keep a journal, and it's something that I haven't done and I keep meaning to do. But you've proved by keeping a journal, even just scribbling notes down, whether you do it daily, weekly, you're going to produce. Obviously, you can produce a book from that. And I have heard the saying that there's a book in everyone, that they can write a book. And you just obviously demonstrated that. So I'm wondering if you can just give us an overview of what the book is actually about.
Sure. Yeah. So I guess at the end of the day, it's just a record of my travels and my travels with my wife overseas. There are also a couple of fictional chapters and a poem. So I've tried to make it funny, try to make it interesting. So it's that's about it. I mean, it was just a lot of fun writing it, and I started one of the chapters really sort of brought home to me what we were doing. I mean, I went over to the United States when I was a student to the Silver Valley, northern Idaho. As I was writing that, I dredged up all sorts of memories, which some were good and some were not so good. But so, yeah.
And what feedback have you had so far from people that have read it?
Well, yeah, I've had 2 comments posted on Amazon. Both were glowing, I might say that. Yeah. And I had an email from one of my contemporaries who's also an author and has done 3 or 4 books, but they've been pure fiction books. And he said it was well written, intriguing, and those. You know, I had a book launch on December the 4th and invited about 40 people, and they went through the whole thing. So it was pretty good, yeah. And of course, the family looked at, oh well, we didn't know, you'd done this, or we didn't know that you'd done that, sort of thing. So it's good, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it must be obviously an accomplishment writing a book, and then you get obviously people giving you feedback like that, and like you said, your family asking, curious as to knowing a little bit more about yourself. So no, I bet that's obviously something to be proud of. Is there anything else from the book you would like to highlight? I mean, is there any particular examples or situations or challenges you found that you found yourself in and you resolved? So obviously something that you've learned, that you had a challenge and you overcome.
Yeah, I sort of thought about that a little bit, and one of the times when I was consulting, that was in Armenia, and we were about 350 from the capital, right down on the Iranian border. And it's the first time I'd been to the mine, and I'd been asked to look at it for a client. So we got down there. We had to wait for about 2 hours for a translator to come. So I'm sitting there, had no Russian other than Niet and Da and Piba, which is beer, very important. So we're sitting there, and they were asking questions. I had no idea. And eventually we decided, oh, chai. Yeah, right. I know what that is, tea. So we had some tea. The translator arrived. So we then go to the site. Wow. It was appalling. It really was. The mill was in such a state. There were no safety guards anywhere. Some of the holding down bolts on the mill shaft had come loose. So every time the mill went round, it would shake the building and the plinth, and boom, boom. There had been no stripping done for many years, so the pit was in it was a really confined space. So we got back to the mine office, and the director's typical Russian style. He's got a great big table in front of him, and his minions sort of lined on a table just down from him. And I'm at the end of the other table. So through the translator, he says, "Well, what did you think?" And I thought to myself, okay, I'm 350k from Yerevan. I know nobody. I don't know the language. What's going to happen if I give a bad report right now? He's going to blow up? You know, the volatile Russian. He was a big bear of a man. What's they going to? Maybe they'll send the driver away, and I'll have to walk back. Well, how the hell am I going to get out of here? I said, well, be very careful on what you say. So I thought about it. I said, okay, well, director, I have been to your mine, and I congratulate you on your ability to produce concentrate with the equipment that you have here. And that sort of satisfies his honor, and I didn't have to lie. So we had more tea and more vodka, and so honor was satisfied. Yeah. Another time I was going to the same mine, and we couldn't get over the mountain because it's on the other side of the Caucasus. So the driver, again, I didn't speak any Russian or Armenian, and it was just he and I. I knew him. So we went up to the mountain pass, and it was blocked. We did that 3 times, came back down, and then next day he jumped in the car, and we went almost back. No, we went back towards Yerevan. He dived off down this side road, and off we went down there, and there were some really big potholes, and the buildings looked like they'd been razed. So we eventually get down to the river that separates Armenia from Iran, managed to get down to the mine. So I'm talking to the translator, and I said, that was a really strange road that we went down there. Oh, yes, he said, engineer. He said, that was the border between Azerbaijan and Armenia, and it's been in dispute for many years. And those craters you saw, they weren't potholes, they were bomb craters. Oh, well, thanks. Let's make sure we go back over the mountain and not that way. Yeah, so there's quite a few other examples of that as well.
Yeah. No, and obviously we'll speak about later about how you can purchase the book. But again, a lot of examples that I suppose you've gone through that anyone that's going to be working abroad, overseas, may encounter. So hopefully you've given some examples for people that may, once they've read the book, may face certain situations. And there's obviously ways in dealing with that. Your expertise is in establishing and starting up of companies in either exploration or mining projects. What advice can you give our audience of some of the pitfalls that you see with companies that haven't been successful, and what lessons can they learn?
Yes, there are a couple of pitfalls. One that I encountered a few times now is the what I call the Hotel California syndrome. And it's, you can check out anytime you want, but you can never leave. And establishing a company in a foreign jurisdiction can sometimes be easy, sometimes be difficult. But in most of the Latin countries I've worked in, and the same in some of the Near Eastern countries as well, it's very, very difficult to close a company, particularly when, you have pension schemes in place. So beware of the liabilities that you are going to create. Make sure you plan for them, because a lot of people have started these companies in and thought that they were doing well, and then whatever goes wrong, and then you're left with a huge overhang on your responsibilities towards the people that you employed and to the government as well. So just make sure when you start, you know how you're going to get out. One thing is to respect the local hierarchy. You know, the guys in the Department of Mines and those geologists, engineers, etc., that are in country, and listen to them. I've always listened to them and taken advice from them. And again, I think, and it's something to seek early engagement with the local communities. And again, find out where the power lines within those local communities, because there's a lot of, in Europe, especially in Southern Europe, a lot of power has been devolved to municipalities. So even though the government might want you to come in and work there, you've got to make sure that the local community wants you there. So yeah, be careful when you start out. Yeah, just make sure you know what the liability is going to be at the end of the day.
Yeah. You've obviously seen the industry develop over a number of different years. What would you say some of the positives there are from what you've seen over your 40 to 50-year career?
I think the first thing I would say is that we now, as an industry, as far as I can see, take much more notice of stakeholders. We're much more inclusive. And I think, you know, if you look back over the problems a lot of people have had in the past, because they haven't really gotten in touch with and considered the stakeholders. Now, I see that changing a lot. Also, I think digital mining is absolutely incredible. You know, from doing planning on literally sheets of paper in a South African gold mining, saying, okay, we're going to mine this panel, that panel, and then sticking it up on a board, calling that mine planning, to, you know, everything's now done digitally. Again, you still got to be a little bit careful, you know, not to rely totally on mine planning. And then remote mining as well. You know, there's a couple of mines in Finland, I think, now that barely have anybody underground. You know, all the work's done by remotely, LHDs, mucking machines, drilling, the whole 9 yards. Obviously, there's some stuff. So that's a great improvement, I think, to lower the risk in our environment. Yeah.
And how do you see the future of mining? I suppose from what you've just mentioned, obviously the technology, but also the industry as a whole. Obviously, I interview a number of guests on the show, and one of the big issues is obviously the branding of mining, the brand of mining, and obviously non-mining people have this perception of mining being dirty, not environmental friendly, etc. How do you see the future of mining from, I suppose, a few different aspects?
Well, I guess, you know, mining is going to be around for forever. I mean, it's one of the pillars of society. If we need resources, and the key for me is education. And the best way to do that is to get hold of the children, you know, the young children, and explain to them and get them involved in the industry at an early stage. Now, at the King Edward mine here in Cornwall, just outside of Camborne, they run a school mining games every year, and they teach. Well, they compete. About 8 schools compete in games. The games are separation using magnets and iron filings, so they can see how one would use magnetic separation. And then panning, so they do panning. Then they do sawing, so they'll do an exercise with sawing and shoveling and that. So really integrate them. Now, I've done a couple of those, and it's amazing how the attention and the enthusiasm that's within those kids. And these are sort of Form 8, Form 8 people. So I think as an industry, we have to do that. And you're so right. I mean, we look at the Camborne School of Mines now is struggling to maintain its mining engineering division, or its its BSc course, which I find terrible. And I think that's because of branding. I think, again, it's like, oh, do we really want to be associated with mining? With lots of geology courses, lots of courses about rare earths, lots of courses about new metals, but no courses on how to mine them. I think the academics of the world really need to know, or to wake up to the fact that we still need miners.
Yeah, certainly. And that's the biggest challenge, and I think there is moves to overcome some of that, but it's a long process. But as a recruiter, I can see big challenges in the future, in the near future or near to medium term future, in obviously with all the projects around the world and operations wanting to expand. A lot of these projects and operations are going to be hindered by the lack and amount of skilled people, i.e. like mine engineers, like mine geologists, moving forward. So, yeah, it's something the industry is aware of, and I think they are making moves to change that, but it obviously just takes time.
Yeah, I was going to say, I have a young nephew who's desperate to get into mining, and what he's done, good for him, is he's taken on an apprenticeship in South Crofty, and he went, I can't find anywhere in the UK where I can get a degree. So yeah, it strikes home when one of your nephews is trying to follow your footsteps, if you will, and he can't do it. Shame. Yeah. Anyway.
So I mean, I suppose the other options could be distant learning, or he goes overseas to overseas university.
Yeah. One of my friends made the suggestion that he goes quarrying to start, and then goes back to the School of Mines if he wants to do, because they do masters in mining engineering. So that's one way around that we looked at. Yeah. And like you say, you could go overseas. Yeah.
Yeah. So just obviously concluding, wondered if you wanted to add anything else. Also, how can people purchase the book Overseas and Underground Adventures of a Modern Cornish Miner? Obviously, the book that you've recently produced.
No, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to come on your show. I've always taken Mining International. So it's good to be with you. To purchase the book, Amazon.co.uk. I haven't got it in the shops yet. It's available in ebook, hardback, paperback, and as I say, Amazon, Waterstones, Barnes and Noble, Apple I. So yeah, if you just Google it, the Amazon site will come up right away.
Yeah, certainly. We can include that in the show notes, the company, so people can click on that and either download it or purchase it via Amazon. Encourage the people out there that are listening to this. Appreciate you if you can have a look and purchase the book. It's a pretty low cost book. And if you can share this episode with others in the industry, so they can obviously listen to this podcast, but also and then have to look to purchase the book. I haven't read it myself yet. I will surely will do, but it will give an insight to someone that's worked in the industry for 40 plus years, has traveled the world, seen many things, experienced many cultures. Because it can resonate with you if you're looking to possibly work overseas. So really appreciate your time, Alan. Obviously, a friend, mutual friend, Nick Clark, obviously suggested that I reach out to you and get you on the show. So so thank you to him. Wish you well in the book. And what else apart from obviously promoting the book? What else are you actually doing at the moment? Are you doing anything within the industry?
I have one client that I keep in touch with, and occasionally he seeks advice, I think would be the way to do it. And I've been involved with his project for, I don't know, 15 years, and turned it around a couple of times, and he's making money from it. And occasionally there's problems crop up, so I do that for him. Do a little bit of mineral collecting around here in Cornwall, and generally just try and relax a little bit.
Yeah. So even after 40 or 50 years of in the industry, it never leaves you.
Absolutely not. No, it's, and being Cornish, I'm from Camborne. It really is. It is in the blood, I'm afraid. Well, not afraid. I'm happy to say it's in the blood.
Yeah. Well, I wish you well with the book, the success. Really appreciate you coming onto the show and sharing your wealth of experience. And hopefully the people that are listening and have listened to this episode get to take something from it, and also hopefully they look at purchasing the book. So wish you well for the future. And until next time, happy mining.
Thank you for listening. Remember to reach out to Rob via the show notes, and be sure to subscribe and leave a review. Until next time, happy mining, helping each other to improve the mining industry.